Welcome to the Startup Grind.
Hello, welcome to Startup Grind, actually.
Thank you. And thank you all for being here. Please give yourself a round of applause. I think I love coming to events like this because people who take the effort to be here today are a different breed. You guys are the kind of people that I want to work with, that I want to hire. So, anybody looking for a job, please let us know. We're quite desperate.
Okay, before we move on to that, I just want to ask you a few questions. Just basically, so just talk about how were you when you were growing up? Actually, do you know about this startup thing, or was that there?
So, I was really naughty, and I think I was brought up in a family where you kind of need to not take care of yourself, but money is not something that comes easily, So when I was really young, I sold when my mom used to go to, I was based, I'm Sabahan, so from KK to fly to Hong Kong was very cheap at that point of time. So we used to fly there, and then I'll buy t-shirt from the markets, and then try to sell to my neighbors and stuff like that. So I did that when I was young, and then nobody really knows this, but my family then, my dad used to do business, and then when we had a really rough time, and then when he had to sort of almost declare bankrupt, I was really young, and then I cut all these stuff, like origami, and said, maybe we can sell all these kind of things, maybe we can, make money. So, my parents always kind of thought that there are no surprises for them, what I want to do with my career. And that it would be an unconventional one.
So, so from Sabah, you actually moved to Johor. Did you? How old were you then, actually?
I was in it's kind of middle of secondary one.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, how was the move there? And were you still hustling when you were young, or?
No, I think maybe just to qualify, when I was young, I had small little moments that I did this, but it wasn't like some people, when they're really young, they straight away start being entrepreneurial. I have small moments where I tried to make money, but it's not like other people, like some other people, like Garnish, for example.
We'll go to him. I think you met him in Johor, did you?
Yes, we met at a computer school. So for you guys, Garnish is actually the group CEO of MOL. So I worked with him for many, many years.
Was that your first job, or?
It was my first proper job. I think before that I worked in Citibank,
okay.
Selling housing loans.
Okay. So just before we move into that, what was your first impression of Garnish when you first met him? We were young, right? We were in secondary school, and my impression of him was that I always knew he would be someone. Okay.
I always knew he would be great. Yeah. So that was, and of course, he was eccentric. He had his own quirks. Okay. But I had no doubt in my mind that he would be someone.
Okay. And so after graduating, you had a gig selling housing loan, and how long was that?
Almost a year. I came back from school, and I wanted to stay in Johor Bahru with my parents. So I was studying in KL, and then I went back to Johor to work, and then I thought, I just want to spend some time with them before I start doing anything else. So the most big company there was Citibank, and the jobs that they were hiring for was actually selling housing. So it's a sales role. And it's actually very painful because I'm not really the best salesperson. So on the day that I joined, induction day, so they asked me to stand in front of 300 employees. That's the size of the company. And they said, we're going to turn on the music. So they introduced me, Cheryl, new sales, blah, 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 with another 10 other people. And they said, we're going to turn on the music and Cheryl's going to start dancing. And I'm like, what? And it's not like, R&B, not trance. It's like rock. It's not that easy to dance to.
That's nice.
So, I mean, the lesson there, they told me that when it comes to sales, you need to be really thick-skinned. So if you can't dance in front of 300 employees, you can't do sales. So I obviously did it, and I did sales for a year with Citibank. It's a great experience on how to be really just driven and thick-faced and just doing what it takes to get the job done at execution level, at the ground level.
Very tactical thing. And okay, so why, before we move to MOL, Singapore was just across the causeway, so why didn't you decide to move to, was there a consideration there?
No, I then was in Singapore for a couple of months. I then started to do sales in a company called Informatics. I don't know whether you guys are familiar. It's an education institution. And so I was selling courses to people, right? So I worked in informatics for a couple of months. And I nearly died because I don't really like, I mean, some of their programs aren't really that good, but because you have a sales target, you need to sell it to all these young students, you know, who, so I couldn't really do it for very long because to me, sometimes pushing something that is not right, it is morally wrong. So I kind of struggled with that, and then I was like, oh my God, this is awful. And then that's how I ended up in MOL because Garnish called me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so Garnish actually headhunted you?
Yeah, I mean, because when I was in college, you know, I was kind of semi-well-known because I used to play Counter-Strike. So I had a club. All girls, we joined WCG, and then... But it's true.
Oh, which is good. I was a marshal in WCG, not qualified enough to be to have a clan.
So he knew that, and so when he started up MOL, he wanted someone with a passion for games and not someone that's not afraid to go into a cyber cafe. Because you know, if you play competitive Counter-Strike, you spend 6 to 8 hours in a cyber cafe, right? Otherwise, you can't aim the flashbang to reflect there and bounce there. You know what I mean? So.
Okay, I don't think I want to go and play with you on that. So what's your first role in MOL actually?
So I started out doing sales in cyber cafe. So I actually had to go to all the cyber cafes, which was mainly SS15 at that time, Silver Surfer, you know, X-Gate and all of that, and then try to get them to download the game that MOL was promoting at that time. So that's kind of how I started out. I really did the groundwork. I went to all the cyber cafes, get them to install the game, get them to try it out, do a lot of community outreach, give out free items and stuff like that.
How was MOL back then? Like, what's the size? How big it was? Or, I mean, now MOL is such a giant. Last valuated at $800 million US. And how was that?
So we were really scrappy. 20 odd people in a office with no real windows, and we had problems meeting salaries. So it's really a real startup, you know. It's like when we go for a road trip, like we go to Johor because we're expanding market, 4 people share a room, unisex, and the hotel is like, you know, 3-star maybe if lucky, and then we even had to like. So I don't know how many of you have ever experienced this, but you get your salary, okay, you get your salary in full, but actually the company didn't pay EPF. They file it later when they have a bit more money. So we used to do that. We never cheated the employees. Eventually they got everything plus interest and whatnot, but it's a real startup where really month to month, day to day, you know, and it's hard to look at it today at the size that they're at, to really imagine that, but it was like that, you know.
I cannot imagine. What year was this actually?
This was like 2004.
2004.
Yeah. So my main role, besides after some time, was to get credit terms. So I spent a lot of time talking to. We used to sell game codes. I don't know if you play games like MapleStory or whatever. We sell it to the public, but we take it from a supplier, a publisher, right? So my job is to negotiate credit terms, like, because we have cash flow problems, so like, can I get an extension for 1 month? Can I get another week? Can I get another week after that? So that's kind of my role, besides securing the game. So I get the game, I tell her how wonderful the company is, and then after that, you know, we have to just keep maintaining the relationship.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I was, well, I have a bunch of questions from Les, who usually will be here. What's the biggest learning as a senior VP of business development for MOL? Like,
so that was a biz dev role, right?
Yeah.
And I think when it comes to business development, the most important thing is it needs to be win-win. You cannot be the only winner. Your partner, the person that you're working with, also needs to win. And that makes a great relationship. So for us, if we didn't have that, we couldn't negotiate credit terms, because who wants to give you credit terms, right? They want to be the first people to pay up. If it wasn't win-win, they wouldn't give me something better than my competitor. Because, so like, you know, it's a market where everybody is selling the same thing. What made MOL number one is because we have a competitive edge, and what the competitor can't maybe see is that it's because I negotiated better terms, better products, so the customer maybe pays $10, but they get $120 worth of credit. So the only way that we could do that is because they win in some way. So I think what I learned is that it needs to be a sustainable relationship. Until today, when I am doing regional marketing, and I used to do gaming across the region, it's been many years, I can still call them up and say, I need help, I need a PR company, they can do it for me cheap, or can I borrow your designer, can I borrow your translator, and they'll still help me. And it's been like 4 or 5 years that I'm out of the industry.
so it's really about building relationship that lasts, basically.
Yeah, so I think that's the most important thing. If you're a BD person, then that's your job. You build a sustainable relationship where, you know, sometimes company will want, the company always wants more. The company that I work for, MOL, for example, always wants more. But your job is to understand that you have some control and you have some convincing power to tell your boss. I mean, Garnish is known for being really like Chinaman, although not Chinaman lah. So, despite being that, you know, it's about him.
I think the word you're looking for is shrewd.
Yeah, shrewd. So, you know, I think it's about having that, understanding that that's how business works, right? You know, many years down the road, I will still do business with some of these people. Some of these people I've hired into GrabTaxi, MyTeksi.
One of the big news for MOL was actually Friendster, and you were in the whole mix of it, basically. Tell us a bit, like, what went through the whole thing, actually, if you can share. Whatever.
Okay, so part of this is under NDA, so I'll tell you what I can tell. So actually, 2 years before we bought Friendster, when Friendster was still huge, I sat in Garnish's office, and he told me, Cheryl, our next growth is we're going to buy Friendster. And I'm like, this is like when EPF still sometimes late, you know. I'm like, are you serious? We're going to buy Friendster. So he said, yeah, we're going to buy Friendster. So it started with that. He really believed that for the next phase of growth for gaming, you just need a lot of people, and you need a lot of brand. Because MOL, while popular in the gaming sphere and in Malaysia, wasn't really popular anywhere else at that point of time. So there were many reasons to buy Friendster. But of course, we didn't have the money, right? So we thought, let's try to strike a deal with them. So Friendster, at that point of time, was struggling because Facebook was already in the market, and they needed to monetize really, really badly, and they needed a wallet. And so we pitched to be the wallet, and we managed to do that. So it started with a commercial deal. It started with Friendster appointing MOL as the person that would develop their payment gateway, their wallet. And so that's kind of how it started.
And that's
then,
Richard Kimball, is it?
Yeah, so Richard Kimball was the CEO at that point of time, and Jeff Roberto and all those people. So we managed to get the deal, and then we started with that. We started with that commercial relationship. And then around that time, what happened was the owners, the shareholders of Friendster, which were all based in the Silicon Valley, they decided after some time to visit Philippines, which is where Friendster, so Friendster at that time was big in the US, or had an office in the US, and the second biggest office was in the Philippines. And so they decided to visit the Philippines office. So all the investors from the US came down, and then when they visited the Filipino office, they decided, we actually wanted a US company, not a Southeast Asian one, you know. And when they looked at Philippines and the market, they said, no, this is not what we want. So they wanted to exit. So that trip actually marked when they decided to look for someone to buy.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So that's that. And among the whole mix of it also, you started a company, Social Walk.
Yeah, so around that time, MDEC started
The MSc Pre-Seed.
MSc Pre-Seed grant, and I, together with a good friend who was actually here but has left, we started a company to pitch for the grant, and we actually got the grant. It was 150,000, and then we then got another round through the Icon grant. So the company is, of course, when I was doing this, I was still working for Garnish and for MOL, and I told him, well, boss, you always say that we need to be entrepreneurial. This is kind of my chance, So he is very generous. He said, okay, no problem. I'll give you any advice that you need, and as long as it doesn't interfere with your work, I'll be watching you like a hawk. So, obviously, I started it with a friend, and then we managed to get some traction and things like that. So the company still exists today, but and has secured some funding. It's doing quite well.
Not announced yet, yeah. The company is doing quite well, actually, I have to say. Not exist today, so you're just being a bit modest about it.
So I officially kind of, while I still am a director and have small shares in the company, I kind of exited from the company because, if you're in a startup, if any of you are thinking of doing a startup, yourself and your partner need to be fully committed. And at that point, I'm the wrong person because I wasn't. I was thinking initially of quitting my job at MOL and do this startup full time after the funding and everything. But I decided not to because at that same time, the Friendster acquisition was happening. And I told myself, if I don't stay on with Friendster, with MOL, this is I won't have like Silicon Valley experience. This is like my only chance to really get that kind of experience. So I exited from Social Walk, which is the name of the company, on very good terms actually. Today, the founder was here.
We're still advisor. We're still officially an advisor to them.
Yeah. So I exited the company, and they've continued to grow, and they're doing really well. And then I stayed on with Friendster. So that was quite a hard decision. I had to decide between my own startup and the one that I was working for that was growing really rapidly. And I think for people that are doing startups, you might come to that point one day. You have to give up. A successful startup needs full time, I think.
Well, what was the? I know Garnish was really supportive of you guys, and I was actually with you guys throughout a lot of the journey. And what was the most impactful advice that Garnish gave or anyone gave for Social Walk actually?
So I think it is really about. I think the most important thing was for us to understand who are we trying to sell this product to, and I think when we started out, we wanted to be LinkedIn. The company that we founded was sort of like LinkedIn. Today it's like a bit like like more like Alibaba than anything else, and I guess. The lessons that we learned was that you need to know your audience, and then you need to be prepared to pivot. And for that company, we did it many, many times. And today, I think it's solid in terms of the business model. It took quite long, but that's where we are today.
I think it started off as a ticketing system.
Yeah, it was social network, and then we got rejected by MDEC. They said this is crap. So then we tried, like ticketing system.
I didn't judge that, right?
No.
Then we became a ticketing system, which I end up using a lot for my events.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then, but we realized there was a lot of problems with chargeback and making money and things like that. So we pivoted. And then now what we do is we help match potential buyers and sellers. So if you're a Malaysian company and you're trying to get into China, or vice versa, what we do is we help make that happen. So if anybody is trying to do export business or whatever, you can talk to King Yu. I'll introduce him to you guys. He's an awesome person. Great.
I think that's a very good way to describe King Yu. So, so after the Friendster acquisition, how long actually you stayed over with MOL?
So after acquisition, I think I was with them for another year. I spent a lot of time between Malaysia, Philippines, and the US. So it was quite a mad traveling schedule, and I was, yeah, so another year.
So describe like a typical day over in MOL Friendster, like if you can remember it.
So, wow. So because it's between time zones, so usually we start out with a call involving the different teams. We try to talk about the problems that we have. I mean, at that point, honestly, Friendster wasn't, we needed to pivot, right? Because after the acquisition, we knew that remaining a social network, the company will just die. So we needed to pivot. We needed to be more Asian-centric. So to be honest, a lot of time was spent planning for that, but also it was very challenging because a lot of the employees were from the US. They had different vision, different work culture, and a lot of time was just spent trying to overcome those challenges and those differences. So, you know, I mean, some days would be really good and some days there'd be screaming matches in the company when people disagree. We're quite open, so, you know.
So, so after that, you were headhunted to join a really traditional company, NST. What made you choose that, actually? What was your thought process back then?
So by the time I left, I started out as an assistant manager. I left senior VP for business development and product. And basically the next level is CEO. So no more, it's like a glass ceiling, right? So I guess at that point I thought, you know, MOL was my first real job. And everything I know about the work universe is defined by one company and also one man. Because if you guys understand how MOL is, at that point of time, Garnish is very prominent in the company. And because I work under him directly, my perception of what work is and what leadership is defined by one person. So I thought it's time to work for someone else, to work for something else. And then, you know, I got a call from NSTP. So if you guys don't know, it is the largest newspaper company in Malaysia. They own Berita Harian, Harian Metro, and News Straits Times. So I got a call from them and they said, would you come for an interview? And I was like, no, no way. But the headhunter was very aggressive. You know, he said, look, the CEO is very interested to meet you. He's a very nice guy. He's very influential. He will be able to convince you. Just there's nothing to lose if you just meet him, right? So I ended up meeting the team and was, you know, it was different, right? I walked into an office, so MOL open concept, a bit like this. I walked into a typical government office. Like the dividers are like about my height. Can't see anyone, can't find anyone. Everybody's like hiding, right? And I was like, okay, this is going to be interesting. So I went for the interview and I met a bunch of people that kind of impressed me. They showed that they were actually very intelligent, very smart, and they really wanted to make a change. And this was the new management for NSTP. And I thought, and they were like, and I wasn't convinced, but they said, okay, meet the CEO. And basically they told me this. This is what sold me. They said that you come from a startup experience, right? Where everything is limited. You have limited money, limited resources, limited time. And even at that point, MOL was still operating like a startup. We still had, you know, we didn't have that much money. Although we were big, cash flow is another thing, right, for any company. So NSTP is very different. They are cash rich. They are really well to do. So they said, just imagine you get a startup environment, but the person that owns the bank has a lot of money. Now, how much fun would that be? And you can do whatever you want. I thought, doesn't sound too bad, you know? It doesn't sound that bad. And then I went and see the CEO. And this is another person besides Garnish that shaped my life. He's an awesome leader. And he met me. He told me, and before I met him, he made me fill out, they made like 2 hours before my interview with him, they made me fill up this questionnaire online, and it's actually a disc. It's like to discover what you are as a person. So I filled that up, and then I got to the office. And then when I got to the office, he said, okay, I don't know anything about digital, which is why I'm hiring you. I don't know how to change newspapers. I don't know how to get more people to read newspapers. But your profile is really good. And the people that interviewed you really like you. And I did your disc profile, and I can tell you I'm the perfect boss for you. So I mean, my profile is, I can't remember, but you know, like it was basically just like the type of person that you should work for. In that report is his personality. So he says, trust me, you will enjoy working for me. And so I did. I joined. It was really, really fun. I think you were also part of that journey.
Yeah, well, we know each other for quite a while, so pretty much throughout your whole career.
So it was really nice, I think, as a sign of commitment. This is NSTP. If you ever drive past Balai Berita, you will see this huge orange building. Now that orange building was not there before I joined. It was just a warehouse.
It's it used to be a badminton court.
It's a paper plant.
Yeah,
so they had machines in there, and it says, Cheryl, as a sign of how committed NSTP is in terms of digital, I will spend 1 million to make this the most awesome workplace you can imagine. And it's 3 stories, so they remove half of it so that it's huge volume. It was just one, I think it remains one of the best offices today, although they have like kind of like, you know, they've kind of like not, it went back to corporate after the CEO changed. But it was really fun. We did a lot of hack events there. We did a lot of cool things.
It's a nice office. I really like it.
And I think during that time we helped do things like we helped modernize the websites, make sure that they have a proper mobile site. We tried to do acceleration, but I didn't stay long enough to see that through. But that was one thing that I really wanted to do for the company, because they have what they have that a lot of startups don't have. They have money and they have reach. So just imagine if you have a great idea and you are accelerated within that environment, you have a very high chance of success. So that's what I actually wanted the digital arm for NSTP to do. It basically was just sort of like our little project, because NSTP has 1,600 employees. A lot of them, some of them might be their first job, and they've worked all their life in a news organization. So what we wanted to do was to bring more events, sort of like Startup Grind, Hack Weekends and things like that, to our office to let people who work there understand what's happening on the outside, what's happening with the startup community, what's happening with social enterprise. So that's kind of what we wanted to do to expand, what they understood about the world around them.
So, what was your experience like? I mean, from like, I know MOL was like rushing, everything was like crazy. You're basically holding your tiger by your tail. How was NST actually?
It was very different. I think in the first month of me working, I ran into my CEO's office in tears and said, I am so not the person for you. Because it was very frustrating, because in the past, I'm really spoiled. I work for Garnish, and we have a very good relationship, and everything that I want, I pretty much get if I can justify it, And in this case, even if I can justify something, there will be people who don't understand what I'm saying, who will just say no because it's the safe thing to say, the safe thing to do, So I really struggled with that. So I would go into a presentation with 8 other senior people, and I was, so that time, the CEO of NSTP, 14 people directly report to him. I'm youngest by maybe 10 years, female Chinese, the wrong profile. So, I would present to all these people who didn't understand anything, and if you don't understand anything and I'm asking for a budget, the easiest thing is to say no. So I was very frustrated, and 1 month into the job, I thought, that's it, this is rubbish, I can get a job anywhere else in an environment more suitable for me. But then my CEO told me, he said, so working at NSTP is like running a country. And he said, you know. It's very easy. All you need to do is, so he said, my problem was I would go into this boardroom and present to all these people and they all don't understand me. So he said what I needed to do was to lobby first. So before all these people get into the boardroom, I have to meet them one by one to say, hey, you know, this is my presentation, this is why it's good, this is blah, blah, blah. So I win that person over, so I just need to win half. So that's what I learned in NSTP, you know, diplomacy, lobbying, convincing decision makers, ineffectively, but it still works, how to get things done. So I think that was one thing that I learned working there, and it was very valuable because today sometimes when I get frustrated where I work in MyTeksi, I tell myself it's nothing compared to what I've done in the past where I spend hours trying to explain to people, you know, what is a Facebook ad, what is social media, why we need this. So I think that's one thing that it's taught me is just, you know, like to lobby and to be diplomatic and to understand that when people are afraid and they don't understand, they're more likely to say no. So okay, you were in MST for how long were you Almost
there?
2 years.
Almost 2 years. So I think, so at that point in time, MyTeksi was just a startup. Like you were the number 18 employee, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Somewhere around there. And what made you join? What made you join something? I mean, human will strive for security. What made you join a crazy startup back then?
So from NSTP actually, so if you guys understand how government GLCs work, they will lose their CEOs sometimes after a couple of years, and usually the senior management will go together. So I was the go together lah. So I wasn't asked to leave, but I really wanted to go because the new direction wasn't in line with what I wanted to do with my career, and I had options to go somewhere else. And I'm glad I did. So anyway, what happened was I was offered a job to work in Nissan doing marketing. That is actually how it all began. So, you know, I met Anthony, who is the founder of MyTeksi, at this event. It's called Anugerah Bintang Popular. I don't know whether you guys know, but it's an award show that NSTP organizes. So I met him there, and in his mind, he already knew he wanted to hire me because he spoke to someone who said, hire this person. So he was very charming. You know, I was like, oh, he's such a nice guy. He's so big. But he, you know, after the event, he sent me a thank you note. Thank you. It was so wonderful meeting you. Let's meet up for drinks, blah, blah, blah. I was like, oh my God, he's so humble. And then, so, and so I met him several months later. And then basically he just did a really hard sell for me to join him. And at that point, it was between joining Nissan, which is his family business, and MyTeksi. And he just said, join Nissan because MyTeksi can't afford you.
So how long were you in Nissan?
So I was there for about 9-10 months. I was in Nissan for 9 or 10 months, and then I decided I had enough of this bullshit. I want to go back to startups. I had a job offer, COO for a startup that just got listed.
Okay.
So I was like, oh, I'm getting out of here. And then that's when Anthony said, okay, because I work really well with the founder, with Anthony. And then he asked me to take on the role for regional marketing. And then I guess 9 months after the initial meeting with Anthony, they could afford me. So, you know, so I'm working with them.
So at that point in time, when you just joined MyTeksi, just describe how was, I mean, now MyTeksi is everywhere. So can you describe how was it back then?
Yeah, I mean, it was a really, let me see.
Was it the same office?
It was in the same office, but not in the same office. It was like
a small room, the other side.
Yeah, it was a really small room. Like we had one mahjong table, 8 people use it. We share. We don't have fixed seating. Chairs always broke because chairs are actually very expensive. If you guys buy office furniture, it's actually damn expensive. So we buy the cheap one and then it keeps breaking. So it was. In the beginning, the marketing team, there was only one other person and me, and it was very operational, you know. So I spent a lot of time just doing everything. I used to work every weekend without fail at every single event that we could get our hands on. It was really like, I mean, it's so different. Like when I look at, I've worked in several companies now. When I look at MyTeksi, it's just amazing. When I joined, when I signed, there were 16 people in the company. Today we have 300 employees, and I haven't even worked for more than 1 year. So it is.
How many countries?
6 countries, 15 cities.
Wow.
So, I mean, it was very different. I think a lot of my time, that time, was just spent doing things like copywriting, spending time at events, talking to people, just like everything on the ground. And I'm the kind of person I can roll up my sleeves and do that. And then it was just so basically for us, we just don't let an opportunity pass. And I think until today, we still are don't let an opportunity pass kind of things.
I think I can relate a bit because at that point in time when you guys first started, I actually met up with you and Aaron to discuss about an event. And now it's like, I'm traveling, it's like, can you talk to these people? And you have a whole team that actually managed the whole thing. Like, so that happened within about a year, right?
Yeah, so I think the first event that we worked with you is just kind of me, and then now you see a great team that helps. Yeah, so I mean, we've grown really fast. And when I think, and when I first started speaking at places like this, I used to ask people, how many of you have heard of MyTeksi? And maybe 20% of the room. Today, maybe can I ask how many of you have not heard of MyTeksi? So that's the difference. So I think
that's a great job.
Yeah. So I think for us, if you ask me what is the key success factors, I think it's the team. We have really an awesome team. I think the team is a big part of why we work so well. I think we have a good leader. We have a soul. And you know, when you talk to people like me or like any employee at MyTeksi, you will see a real passion, a real fire to make a difference. And I think all these things somehow helped us make the right decisions. So I guess, okay, maybe for specific examples of how we grew, we didn't spend any marketing when we started out, when we were at this stage. We spent a lot of time just making sure that we can give a good enough service to people. You know, then after that, we started to spend on Facebook. So if when I do a survey, when I ask people how do you hear about us? Besides organic, that means besides word of mouth, the other high one is actually through Facebook, and that's where we spend a lot of our money. And then we do a lot of partnerships. So recently we worked with My Burger Lab, my favorite burger. We love supporting local entrepreneurs. We work with Potong Ice Cream. We work with My Burger Lab. We had a small boutique that got broken into, and she then organizes some jiu-jitsu classes, and then we supported that as well. So we work with all kinds of people, and because I think a lot of us, like myself, like Aaron, we've been through failed startups, we've been through difficult startup times, so we try to work very closely with a lot of the local startup scene people.
So I'm going to ask you a bit on the tactical part of growth hacking. So basically you manage user acquisition. Like just describe a bit what was the process, what's the process like, what you guys did, and etc.
Okay, so I think if you guys are familiar with growth hacking, it always starts with product market fit, right? So you need a product that really, really works. And it needs to be something that people want to use. So like, you know, I had a good time. I walked around today, and a lot of you, thank you so much, said good things. You guys had a great experience coming here today using MyTeksi. And so it starts with that. You need a good enough product that people want to spend money on. And for us, we didn't spend a single cent until we hit a certain level of greatness with the product. So that was the first thing. I think after that, then it was just about measuring all the various things that we could do. We could do events, we can buy Facebook, we can do partnerships, we can buy a newspaper ad, buy taxi ads, whatever. And then just trying to measure it as best as we could. And then spending more on the things that work and spending less on the things that don't. So if you're a startup, I think number one is really make sure your product, so the common is very general and it's not for everyone, but how do you know you have product market fit is when you interview your users, 40% of them say they will be very disappointed if your product doesn't exist anymore. Then you know you're onto something. You have a good product, right? So 40% of your users say that I'll be very disappointed if I can't use your service anymore. Then you know it's time to start to spend some money. Okay? And then when it comes to marketing, look for the low-hanging fruits. So I think I was talking to Freshcart, right? And there are many ways that you can market a product, right? You can target like, you know, maybe the older people. You just go for the most obvious market first, you know, because, and make sure that you give them a really great service, because then they'll tell other people. So go for the obvious market, go for the low-hanging fruit. So for us, it was, when we started out in Malaysia, the low-hanging fruit was actually people like you guys, the tech community, because most of you are savvy, are influencers, have smartphone, have data. And so what me and Aaron did, more Aaron at that point of time, he really just went out and spoke at all these tech conferences, you know, and get the word out that we're here today. And then after that, it was just spending on Facebook. So, you know, I think do that. And then the third thing would be like, you know, really be really anal with your analytics. Like, look at data, but don't, a lot of people always talk about big data, you know, let's measure all these things. You don't have the time, you don't have the money, you don't have the resource to measure everything. You just need to know what's that one thing that really matters in your business. Like in your case, it's to sell more fruit, or maybe it's to have more corporate clients. What is that the most important metric in your business? And then you understand that, and then all the various things that influence that. So for us, it's rides, right? And rides happen when you make a booking and a driver accepts. That's a ride. Before that, if you make a booking, but the driver don't accept, that's not a ride, right? It's just a booking. So for us, it's a ride, and a ride is defined by two things: passengers booking, drivers accepting, and then we just work down the funnel to understand what are the various things that make it happen. And we're religious about that.
MyTeksi also have traditional advertising, basically. Like, what do you find that effective, or is that something necessary you have to do? Or?
I mean, I think the reason why we have traditional advertising is because we've exhausted the low-hanging fruit. We've done a lot of online marketing, we do a lot of events, and for the next stage of growth, we are trying traditional marketing because, for a number of reasons, I used to work for a media company, so I get a really good rate. So okay. I mean, like, you know, you might see us in some digital boards and everything. Trust me, the rate that I got is astronomical. So it still makes sense. You know, if it was a rate card rate, I wouldn't be paying for it. But because I got a really good rate, so, you know.
Okay. And do you measure traditional versus online?
So I think as a marketeer, I know as a CEO, this is hard to explain to, but as a marketeer, you need to understand there's two types of marketing. There's awareness, branding, and there's direct response. And you need to really understand that both are needed. Maybe in the beginning of your business, you need direct response because you need to survive, you need to grow, you need to show investors or your partners that you are growing. But there is also awareness, and this is a bit more qualitative. How do you know that awareness works? So for example, you interview the audience and ask them, have you heard of MyTeksi? And it's good, right? All of you have heard of MyTeksi. And then I'll ask you, have you used MyTeksi? And then what do you think of MyTeksi? So it's qualitative. So awareness is measured by that. And you have to make a difference. So I always tell my CEO this because he's very direct response, like rides. I'm like, rides is one thing, but if people don't have a preference to your brand, it means nothing, right? Because you will always have options. Why do you choose me over someone else? Is because you prefer me. I deliver you a better service. I give you some emotional connection. It's why people prefer Adidas over Nike or Nike over Adidas, depending.
Okay, so MyTeksi have actually expanded beyond Malaysia quite a fair bit. I think Singapore was first.
So Philippines was the first country we expanded out of.
Okay, and what was the reason for the branding change? Was it confusing for?
So we debated with this, and so we started out in Malaysia. We are MyTeksi, and then when we went to the Philippines, we tried using MyTeksi. But to a Filipino, when you ask them to spell the word taxi, they will spell it T-A-X-I, T-A-X-Y, T-A-X-E-E. They will never think T-E-K-S-I. It's just not in the realm of the way that they pronounce words. And we realized that we had a problem. And then when we tried to use the word MyTeksi, the proper English spelling, there is already a German company that already does the same thing. So we were driving downloads to them. And they also obviously sent us a cease and desist letter. So we're like, oh. So we then decided, let's use GrabTaxi, and that's what we're known outside of Malaysia. We've still maintained MyTeksi. We're still debating. It's quite a bit of a confusion, but this is where we are. Sometimes I think it's the price of being a Malaysian company. We are proud of where we're from. We like the My, because My means Malaysia. Taxi is a Malaysian spelling. A lot of the senior management is actually Malaysian. So we fight very hard not to rebrand, and I think investors don't really mind as long as we deliver the numbers. So for the foreseeable future, which for us is quite short, because for us six months is long-term planning. So, but for the foreseeable future, we won't be rebranding as yet.
So it's MyTeksi / GrabTaxi in this case.
Yep.
Okay, so you have done like Philippines, Thailand, Singapore, Vietnam, Indonesia. What's next?
I think it's about we want to go deep in the countries. So for example, we're in Manila. We are now in Cebu. Are going to go to Davao. So it's about going deep in the countries that we're in. I think. We are still because we are in hyper growth. So sometimes there are certain things that we don't do well enough. So maybe being a bit more standardized when it comes to employee benefits, a bit more standardized when it comes to branding, but just continue to grow deep in the countries that we're in. So more cities and things like that.
I also remember that day you were sharing about your lesson learned in terms of replicating your marketing idea from one country to another. Can you share a bit about that?
Yeah, so I think for us, we are in many countries, and every country is really, really different. And what works in one country might not work in another country. So maybe some simple examples would be like when it comes to our ads. In Singapore, for example, they don't like cartoons, but in Thailand, they really like if the ads have cartoons. So, I think measuring all of that helps you make the right decision when it comes to expanding regionally. Also, maybe Facebook or maybe search or maybe events might be a great way to expand in one country, but when you move to another one, because of the context, it doesn't work. So, I think that's why a big part of when you market is really you need to measure, because then you know whether something works and it doesn't. And I think sometimes when you roll out campaigns, big campaigns, and sometimes the boss will ask you, do you know for sure that this will work? Especially if it's a new one, something that you've never done before. It's very hard, You just need to trust your gut and put it out there, but then quickly measure it and then see whether you want to continue or stop it. So I was at this conference where Henry, which is the CEO of Astro, so he was talking about marketing, right, and putting innovative ideas out there. And a lot of times people will ask you, how do you know this marketing campaign will succeed? And it's very hard because you won't know until it's out there. So for him, he likes doing this. And I believe in the same thing. You, as the marketeer with the idea, you need to believe in it enough to tell your boss, I will put my head in the chopping block if this doesn't work. Your boss will still keep you alive even if it doesn't work. But you need to feel that sure, then you roll it out.
So when it comes to marketing, also in terms of branding, we do know the taxi scene or the car rental scene. There's Uber, there's GrabTaxi, there's Easy Taxi, there's Taxi Monger. How do you guys differentiate each other? How do you guys?
So I think in a world where everybody, there is choice, right? There is choice for everything that you do nowadays, and that's good for consumers. I think for us, what really makes us different, I feel, and this is personally just me, is that from the core, if you look at the people who founded the company, the senior management, you will see that we are really here to solve a problem. We're not here to IPO, we're not here to do whatever. We're here really just to try and solve the local problem. It's the reason why actually when we expand into other countries, we're still market leader. And the reason is because every country that we go into, the solution might not be the same thing. So I'll give you an example. If you look at Malaysia, Malaysia is about safety, right? About the drivers not using the meter. But in Singapore, it's not the same problem. They don't have safety problems. They don't have, they don't have meter problems. But we are also dominant, and we're dominant enough if you read enough articles, especially in Singapore. They even have this thing where it just came out in this website. They said, now the taxi uncle will ask the passenger, hey, do you Grab? So it's become like, do you Google? You know? So it's kind of a bit like, I'm not sure whether I would like that, but they ask, hey, do you Grab?
Is there a Hokkien version of that?
I don't know, man, but if you want an article, I'll send you guys the link. It's hilarious. But, so, I mean, I think how is that possible? I think it's about really understanding your consumer, your market, your audience, being really focused on that product market fit. I am a big proponent of this thing. If you don't solve a real problem, your growth is artificial, And I think for us, we try to spend a lot of time thinking about that, and that's kind of what makes us different. So, I mean, it's the same thing. If you look at Nike and Adidas, for example, what makes them different? It is the essence, right? It's the intangibles that you can't see. The people, the spirit. Yeah, so we, in the world of Uber and Easy Taxi, we are actually smaller. We have less money. But we know that we will win this.
Okay. So the question is basically, GrabTaxi recently received a Series B of 50 million US dollar, and what's the process of actually getting that?
So Series B is like the easy part, Before it's the hard part is actually before that, because once you get to a certain size, so okay, just specific to Series B, we didn't have to do much. Like, we didn't have to do a road show. Most companies will need to go and ask for investment dollars at that point. But because for us, we were so successful sounds arrogant, but we had growth. We showed numbers that we had a lot of investment interest. People would flock to our Facebook. So people like SoftBank, Rakuten, they'll actually email us through the Facebook and say, hey guys, I'm the investment person. We should be interested for investment. So honestly, at Series B stage, we already had enough momentum that to get the funds wasn't difficult. It was just choosing the right one, choosing the right partner that allows us to continue to grow the way that we want to grow. Because when you have investors, you have more responsibility, more people to answer to. And you need to find the right one that will allow you to continue on the right path or will add value to you. So for us, our major investor for Series B is a company called GGV Capital. And they are a Silicon Valley-based fund, but strong foothold in Asia. And their strength is actually, the partner managing us is a guy called Jisun, and he's very good with the China market. And China market, if you understand the taxi space, it's very competitive. They have Kuaiti and TT, and they are very competitive, and he understands that market really well. He can tell us what works and what doesn't, and they add a lot of connections and value to what we do. So yeah, we're probably we're very thankful to have options. they were not the highest valuation, to be honest. We chose them because we felt we wanted this kind of investor. You know, they had the right profile. They invested in a lot of other successful companies. So we wanted them as our investor. But I guess for everyone else that's raising money at an early stage, which is what I've kind of done before, it's really a full-time job. And I think the most important thing, if you're a startup must show growth. If you have no growth, I think it's very hard for anyone to want to invest in you. I mean, seed money, yes, it's idea stage. So you can get someone to invest small amount of money in your seed project. But beyond that, for the next series, you need to show like growth and faster than market. So, you know, if you don't understand, I would recommend anyone to doing startups to really understand that that's so important, your numbers, your growth. It's like, how did people know Facebook would be successful before it was successful? It's just looking at the amount of time that people spend on Facebook and how it just keeps increasing, and that's how investors knew before Facebook was even big, before it even reached this region, that it would be successful. That's growth numbers.
Over there? Yeah, just.
At this point, it is almost in the realm of an impossibility. I think we are quite a stretch team. I think Southeast Asia is like baby China, 600 million people, 500,000 taxis, 7 million rides a day. I think, you know, we've not even touched the tip of the iceberg, so a long more way to go for us.
Sorry, go ahead.
So you're talking about MyTeksi and how you're trying to solve the problem there, right? Which is quite obvious. But what is the direction for GrabCar then? I mean, I think the problem is not that obvious.
Yeah, I think for us, GrabCar, so a few things. If you try to book a taxi during peak hour, I mean, it's challenging despite the amount of taxis that we have, right? So I think why we initially wanted to launch GrabCar was because when we look at allocation rates in the day, they're very high. A lot of people get taxis throughout the day. But when it comes to peak hour, and peak hour is when people really need taxis, that allocation rate actually just drops. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to put more vehicles on the road that can sort of take you from point A to point B. So more vehicles on the road. Now, in other markets, or at least in the Uber market, right? How they do this is actually they have something called surge pricing. And what they do is they increase the price of the fare. And that's how they do it in the US. But because in Malaysia, taxi rates are regulated. So, I mean, our main point is actually the same. We want to solve the same thing. It's an allocation problem, and we're trying to solve that. Also, I think there are people that want, sometimes, you know, you're going for a ball, you want to impress a girl, you want to rock up in a nice car instead of a taxi. So, I mean, I think there are usage for it, but we don't really, it's not our bread and butter. I think it's more of a complimentary service for our users. Sometimes they want to be a bit more luxe, then they can use it.
Okay.
I mean, I think taxis are a regulated rate. And if really that it took extra time because of traffic conditions, I mean, we don't actually, the only thing that we can comment on is if the meter is tempered. But if really that is the route and the road is really close and it's really a jam, that is the kind of like the regulated rate. On the flip side, if he is taking you around deliberately, then report it to us because we are very strict. And then we will take action against the driver. So it's two separate things. If you are stuck in a traffic jam, that the jam was, you know, like the jam is there, you pay the meter rate. If the meter is not tampered with, then, you know, we don't do anything about that because it's kind of beyond our control. If you feel that the driver has taken you deliberately a longer way, do let us know. We take complaints quite seriously.
Okay, I think before we go to audience questions, let me ask you a few serious questions about the startup ecosystem. I mean, you work in a startup, you started a company, and you're back in, you sort of help fund some startups and then help grow some startups. So what's the biggest challenge in terms of the Malaysian startup ecosystem, in your opinion?
I think there's two very key things that we need more of. One is capital, I think, is one. But second thing is also talent. So for those of you who are doing startups, especially tech startups, the hardest is actually to find another co-founder who can build your product for you really well and easy. You know, in Southeast Asia, I've traveled and I've done like talks. We are probably next to Singapore, one of the quite a vibrant market. You know, there's a lot of talks like Startup Grind. We have Webcam, which has now been rebranded to
Level Up.
Level Up. We have all these things that are meant. Now we have Magic. We used to have MDEC pre-seed run. We do have some things to help us get started. But I think what still needs to happen is, number one, we need more successful companies, more MOLs, hopefully more MyTeksis, people that can help inspire, you know, someone instead of working for Accenture to come and work for your startup. You know, someone willing to take a bit of a less salary to work for your company because they can see the dream that it will grow into something big and meaningful. So I think that's one. So like I was recently in Thailand, and we have, hiring in Thailand is very challenging because they don't have any big startups. Like for us, we have, you know, we have Job Street, we have MOL, we have quite a few startups that have kind of like made it, but in Thailand they don't. So for a fresh grad, when you say join a startup, here it's still sort of like semi-cool. Oh, you know, I don't mind, I want to start my own startup, I want to work for a startup. But there it's like, no, I don't want to really work for a startup. You know, or the amount of people is really small. So I think, you know, those are the few things that we kind of need to have in play to kind of improve the system. So funds, not just funds, but fast access to funds. If you're a startup, you're burning money, you need cash, and you need now, you don't want to go through like the long process of getting it, you know, reimbursed. You need mentorship, and then you need talent. I think those would be the...
So what does MyTeksi do to attract talent, actually? You guys grew really fast, basically, in terms of hiring. I saw a bunch of people laughing at the side.
So I think, to be honest, we treat our employees well. We have very low turnover, and a lot of the people that work for us, they are actually friend of friend. We don't have that many, except maybe at the sales and customer service level. Almost everyone knows. It's like, you know, I know you. I know like so Eve used to work for me. Vincent used to be I rock climb with his good friend, and she said there's this wonderful guy, and so you know it's a lot of friends, and they join because we treat our employees well. They then recommend other people. So our growth hasn't been really like, you know, we haven't been like featured in magazines to say best workplace, nice office. We don't have that. What we have is just good word of mouth from the people that work for us. They say that we're a company that's fun to work for, great management team, we take care of our staff, we give great work, and a lot of opportunities. I mean, I think perfect demand and supply, nobody can do it. You know, not us, not our competitors, because it's just hard. I think it's so for us it's about measurement, right? And we have we know what is the measurement for us where one side is more than the other, and so we need to invest more time there. And then we have a measurement where we know that we have too many passengers, not enough drivers. So that being said, it's still not perfect, especially when we start out in new countries. The experience is really not, it's not like in Malaysia. When we started in Singapore, actually, if you Google the comments, it was very negative, you know. And we accept that as part of the challenge. We know that when we start in every country, in the beginning, it's not possible to suddenly have like, 10,000 drivers ready to pick up passengers or to have enough passengers to feed all the drivers. So it's really, I would start with first, you need to understand, so there's demand and supply. So what factors influence demand? What factors influence supply? You need to know this really well. And then you need to know what is that rate where one side is outperforming the other, and then you switch on that lever, right? And then, tell yourself when you are not perfect that nobody can get perfect allocation. Yeah. I think we need to be practical as business people. It's also why, if you look at our branding, we are not the same brand, and it's because we are practical as business people. We know that rebranding Malaysia will be just so painful and maybe lose some of that Malaysia Boleh spirit that we kind of have and we love.
Okay, so thank you, Cheryl, for sharing this wonderful evening with us. We actually learned a lot about you. And come on, give a round of applause to Cheryl.
Thank you, everyone.